Okay, so we have been talking about working with raster data for doing basic analysis like contour and also to um, explore how we can display raster data in a GIS. So now I just want to get into how we can work with manipulating vector data by editing data that's in a database or a geodatabase. And so we have a number of vector data currently in our map. We have a places data that we've joined from the table. We have a roads layer, which is a line vector layer. We have some rivers line layers and contours that were generated from the elevation data. We also have some structure line data, which includes some fault data and some structural data. And then we have our geology polygons for the study area. So before we go further, we want to quickly understand how we can work with the geodatabase or databases in performing edits. So I'm going to go to the browser panel to explore how we can do that. I mentioned that there are um, a number of data base types that we can work with. The first is a geo package, which is a simple file-based data structure that holds both polygons and also vector data. So, for instance, I can decide to export my elevation data, which is currently coming from a TIFF file, into my geo package. Okay, so to do that, I'll right click and say export, save as. I'll select geo package and browse to my geo package. And so in my geo package, I'll select the geo package, okay, and give that a layer name of elevation. Alright, so checking that everything is correct, and I will add that to the map. And so having added that to the map, I can see that my geo package is also able to hold basic raster data types. Alright, so I can change the data source for this to point to the one in my geo package. And so now when I hover over this, I can see that I am now pointing to the elevation data that is in my geo package. So I want to create a polygon layer that I will use to hold my study area together. And so to do that, I will right click in my or I'll create a new in my project folder. I'll create a new directory called GDB, and I can also do this in a geo package. Alright, so if I refresh, I'll see the new GDB folder. So the geodatabase essentially is the Esri file geodatabase format. It is an open file geodatabase format that allows for more extended database functionality than what you might get with a geo package. So if I create a file geodatabase, I'll write a new file geodatabase in that folder, I get this GDB, which is essentially um, a folder structure that contains some geodatabase tables that allow for more advanced and complex database management, but still in the file format. So I can rename this, alright, to something more descriptive, like um, editing the GDB. Okay, and so I can add data to this just as we added to other layers. So if I right click, I'll say new table. Okay, I can call this my study area table. And so I'm going to use a polygon to delineate that study area. So I create what's called a multi-polygon, and polygon stores geometry edits in a geom field. So I'll add a field, an optional field we call name. If I want to, or area, or let me just call it name in my study area. And so this is where you add the field type, all right, which is in this case a text type for my name. I can give it a length, number of characters I want in every attribute in the table of my field. And so I'll click OK. And so under my geodatabase, I can see that my study area has been created in the geodatabase. And so I can bring that into my project. Right now, if I explore the attribute table for the study area, I'll see that it's empty, which means there has not been any new features added to the study area table yet. And I can see the name field I created, which is currently having no values. So there are two columns: the object ID, which is like an identifier for every feature that's created, and the name field, which I use to identify each feature. And so I'll just do some basic styling on my study area so that I can see it clearly. I'll remove the simple field and give it an outline. Okay, and I will rename that. So I want to make sure my boundary polygon is above every other feature. So I'll move that to the top so that I can see. I want my boundary polygon to be on top, just as I have this also on top so that it covers every other feature and I can see that. But I'll uncheck this one for now because I want to work with the study area boundary, or I might optionally leave this for now but give it a different color so that it is distinguishable from my study area boundary. And so what I've essentially done is to create a table of values. Okay, and so the object ID field is okay, also known as the identifier. Okay, it's a field that is used to identify unique objects in my table. So as I create any feature, okay, whether it's a point, a line, or a polygon feature, each one is added to the table as a unique feature and given an unique object identifier. And so I can optionally add other fields like my name field to every feature while I edit. So what I do while editing is creating the geometry of each uh, vector feature. For points, I'm adding both the latitude and the longitude by means of my mouse cursor, all right, to determine the location and tell QGIS to put that into the database. When I'm creating a line, what I'm essentially doing is joining multiple points of various latitude and longitude together to form a line string. Okay, that's why QGIS calls that a line string. And then in polygons, I'm joining points together to form a closed loop. Okay, which creates a closed structure called a polygon. And so what we're doing in editing is to create that table of values. And so while editing, I can also append other information through what we call fields. So fields are these columns that hold extra information. Alright, so when each feature is created, I can add the information here as attributes. So let's explore how we can do that. And so in QGIS, there's a specific toolbar for editing, which is called the digitizing toolbar. And so there are other toolbars that I can use to do more advanced digitizing workflows, like the advanced digitizing toolbar, but we're not going to cover that in this course. And so the digitizing toolbar contains some basic digitizing tools. First is the toggle editing tool, which allows us to begin the editing process for every layer in the map. So if I want to perform edits for every particular layer, I'll have to toggle, make sure the layer is selected, and then toggle editing for that particular layer. So for instance, if I have the narrow boundary selected and I click toggle editing, then every editing function I do will add new data to the narrow boundary layer. I can't edit any other data at this point. So if I hover, if I click any other data, you realize the editor toolbar is not active anymore. Alright, and you can see this pencil icon over here telling me that this is the active layer currently being edited. And so when I click on it again to select it, a number of icons come active on the editor toolbar here again. Now this is a polygon layer, as you can see. Alright, if I hover over it, I see that it's a multi-polygon, and that is why currently what I have active here is editing polygon tool. So that tool is called add polygon feature, which means I can only create polygon feature with this selected layer. So if I click that, I can create polygon by clicking to create a polygon structure. Alright, and when I want to stop the edits, I right click to create the feature, and I can create certain tables, attributes depending on the fields I created. If I don't want to do that, I can cancel and the feature is removed. So I don't want to add any feature to narrow boundary, so I'll toggle off the editing session. I want to edit on the study area, so I'll select that and select toggle editing. Alright, so that will allow us to add polygon features directly to the study area multi-polygon. Okay, so I'll pan to my location of interest. Alright, and I will click the add polygon feature. There are a number of other tools available that we can also use to enhance the editing process, and these are the advanced digitizing toolbar, alright, and the snapping toolbar. Okay, so we also have the snapping toolbar and the shape digitizing toolbar as well. So this is the snapping toolbar, which you can put that over here. This is the shape digitizing toolbar, which contains these shapes, and this is the advanced editing toolbar, which allows us to do more complex workflows and perform more advanced editing tasks. So I'm just going to uncheck that for now. So I want to create a rectangular study area. So I'm just going to use a feature from the shape digitizing toolbar, which is called the rectangle creation tools. And so I'll right click and I can create a rectangle from multiple kinds of editing styles. Um, I can use the rectangle from a center and a point, where when I click, so I click the center and I can create the rectangle from that defined center. I can also create a rectangle from the extent, okay, by creating an extent polygon. And so you realize when I right click, okay, I'm prompted to add information into the name column, okay, the name field I just created. And so I can also do this without using this shape digitizing tools, okay. The base editing tools allows us to either create a segment if we are dealing with lines, features, okay, or okay. So for instance, assume we're editing the roads feature or the rivers feature. Now I will be only able to create a line feature from here. All right, and so that will be my um, but now I'm editing the line feature with a shape workflow. All right, which will only create line in a polygon format. I can also create a segment so that I can create just lines alone. All right, and so if for instance I'm editing the rivers and I'm satisfied with the line I'm created, I'll right click and add whatever features I want and click OK, and it will take the very symbology of our rivers layer. So if I'm not comfortable with that, I can quickly undo that and remove that from the database. Now, one more thing you have to be conversant about is that the edits you're making into the database are different from the styling and the other customizations that are created, okay, that you are adding to your map, like your layer styling and all of that. So if I edit a river, what I'm doing is adding features and data into the data in my geo package where my rivers are stored. All right, but when I'm making settings, I'm adjusting the look and feel of the map. I'm adding that to the project file, and so when I make an edit, I want to save that edit, okay, directly to the database. And so I would use this icon here, okay, which is called Save Layer Edits. If I edit and only click this, then when I stop the edit session, my edits will not get saved to my database. All right, so let us come back to our editing of study area. If you're editing points, the same workflow applies. Okay. Now, if you toggle editing, you have the points. You have the layer creation, create points for you. Okay. So in this instance, you will only be able to create a point geometry at this point. All right. So let us explore how we can create a study area using the various editing tools that we've just seen. I will start an edit session for my study area polygon, and I will ensure that my add polygon feature is active. I want to edit this using a shape, not a line segment, because I want to have a perfect rectangular shape. All right, so I'll use digitize shape, and I will ensure that I'm working with rectangle with a center and a point. So I'll center my or I'll use rectangle from extent. So I'll click the now before I do that, I want to make sure that I have snapping enabled. Now this is the snapping toolbar. Snapping essentially means that when I'm creating new features, I want the vertices, okay, the boundaries, the edges of those features, every vertex I create, okay, to be exactly at the boundaries to touch whenever my cursor comes close to an existing vector feature like rivers or the boundary of this polygon. I want it to match the exact edge or corners, okay, vertices of those features. All right, so assuming I was working with a line segment, all right, without snapping enabled, I can create, but when I get to this point, I'm not able to actually get to the exact boundary, okay. But when I select snapping, okay, when I make snapping enabled, QGIS is able to tell me when I get to the edge of this. As you can see, currently at the edge of the snapping. So the number of snapping options available on the snapping toolbar. Right now I'm snapping to vertices. The vertices are like the edges, okay, places where points or lines connect like this. I can also decide to snap to a segment, that's the line, okay, and vertex as well. So I can snap to vertex and the edges of lines as well. So I'll just leave it for vertex alone. Alright, and I'll create my rectangle from its extent. So I'm just going to hide some layers so that I don't snap unnecessarily to other vector features. So snap to this edge. Alright, and then since I'm digitizing a rectangle, I can now define the extent of my rectangle. And so when I'm comfortable with the extent, I can right click and create, okay, and call this area 1 and click OK. Now I've created the rectangular, okay, extent of the polygon. So when I'm comfortable with this, I can click save edits and stop the edit session. So I can also decide to close the snapping toolbar and shape digitizing toolbar for now and perform other editing workflows. So now we have a polygon created for our area of interest. I want to manipulate, do some analysis to extract this particular region of our map, okay, the elevation for our map, and we're going to perform a geoprocessing function on the raster data to give us this particular region. So what we'll do is go to raster, go to extraction, clip raster by extent. So clipping essentially means removing that particular region, okay, and storing that into a temporary file or into an output raster dataset. We select our input layer as the elevation layer and select using this side arrow panel to calculate our extent from the study area polygon. And so that calculates the extent of the study area polygon. And for now, we'll save that to a temporary file and click run. So we don't see any errors, which means our clip analysis ran successfully. I'll click close, and now we can see a brand new raster created. Okay, this is a temporary file, as you can see from the indicator here. But now if I uncheck my elevation layer, I can see I have a temporary raster layer available for analysis. So I'll remove the original boundary, and now we can work with this for our study area. So the first thing we're going to do is to make this layer permanent by going to export, alright, and saying save as. So we want to export this to a GeoTIFF. We can also export it to a geo package, okay, and so I can export this into our I can also export this into our file geo database, alright, by coming here and going to a GDB folder. I click the folder. Okay, let me just put this in a GeoTIFF for now. So I'll put this GeoTIFF. GeoTIFF essentially is an image file format, a raster file format that stores our values as a file, okay, not in the geo database. So I can put this in a separate folder and call this study area. And I'll call that study elevation. And so when I'm comfortable with that, I'll click OK. So now my layer is now permanently saved in as a TIFF file. And I can remove this. And so if I go to my browser, I can also see the newly created folder here with the study elevation TIFF. So let me just quickly do some styling to make it more visible. And what I can also do to make it more appealing is to perform a clip function on the other vector features in the map. But at this point, I think it's a good place for us to uh, pause the video, and we'll continue in the next section with the geoprocessing functions to create vector features that are particular to our study area.